54%. 54% is the increase in data analytics and customer insights investment last year. Data is food for the AI revolution because it creates the content needed for personalization, which increases business performance. Here's the gap. Most companies are relying on their stale dashboards and ad hoc reporting. The question isn't if you can use live data, it's how you think you can afford not to. So how do you build systems that deliver insights and AI-powered actions in real time? I'm Benjamin Shapiro, and joining me today is Noha Rizk, who is the CMO of Incorta, a unified data delivery platform delivering live detailed data from all of your systems of record with built-in semantic intelligence, faster time to value, and no complex ETL. And today, Noah's going to share how you can harness live data and AI to unlock an immediate impact. Noah, welcome to the MarTech Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Excited to have you here. It's an honor, it's a privilege, and you're sitting in a very interesting spot in today's AI revolution. Incorta, one of the sort of leaders of the industry in making your data live and actionable. So why do so many organizations rely on delayed dashboards still when live data and AI power? So why do so many organizations rely on delayed dashboards when live data and AI can power decisions instantly?
Great question. um, it's a great start to this conversation. I think ultimately, why do most people stick with systems that aren't necessarily ideal as the world evolves and they can do more? I think we can start by saying that people are just committed to legacy systems that they've invested large amounts of money and time to putting together. And changing those systems is difficult. Sometimes it's also hard to change user behavior. I mean, we were just joking around in our planning session today that our finance team continues to use, and I will not mention names, a finance system that majority of the companies use that is just not working for us. And they don't want to change it because they're just used to using it. The modern data stack ultimately is actually quite broken. It's fragmented, it's slow, and it's costly. Legacy processes require staging and conforming data to like outdated models and making reporting kind of backward, and often makes businesses look at obsolete points of information. What's interesting in this moment that we're living is that a lot of companies are scrambling to build AI on top of these outdated stacks, which makes solving the core connectivity and context problems, I think, ever more pertinent.
The story you're telling is a migration problem. And I think that is not new in the technology world. AI feels different. It feels bigger because it is not changing a migration that is on top of the existing stack. Like you said, it's going back to the foundations and the understanding of data processing, cleanliness, right? What data we look at, how quickly we can respond to it.
That's right.
And I do think that you're right. The story is a human problem, not a data, not an infrastructure problem.
It's a little bit of both. I mean, if you think of the early days of the internet, and I think you and I are old enough to remember those days very, very well. You
Don't date
know,
us both. Come on.
I'm sorry, I have to do it. But
Ouch.
but like in the early days of the internet, I remember when we like it used to be, it almost looked like a DOS system. It was like links HTTP, and that was the only way that you could use the internet.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, browsers came onto the scene and everybody wanted to build websites, right? But the websites were being built the way that we used to build brochures for our companies, like physical brochures. They were just like pretty static. We weren't really utilizing the very power of the tools that were becoming available on the market today. And so we were using these rails that suddenly became available that you could build something that's visually pretty, that is cheaper and easier to access than actually going out and building a brochure, that is easier to change the information because brochures were, once they're printed, right? Um, but we didn't actually utilize them the way that we could have built on the internet rails, which is make them clickable, make them a bit more usable, maybe gather information from them, and then eventually use them as payment rails. And I think there's something about this moment that we're living today where people just want to slap AI on top of their existing infrastructure without really thinking through, is this infrastructure actually going to help me maximize what I can do with this new technology?
I just had this conversation today. We're revamping the way that we do our communication for our production business. So, look, you'll get emails from us a week after the interview airs asking you to share something. And it used to be a process where we had somebody go and type out an email, and then we created templates that were a replication of the emails that we were manually typing out. And now we have AI, which can do a better job.
Yeah.
Right? And so naturally, the thing that we gravitated towards was let's take our existing email template and let's have AI fill it out, as opposed to, hang on, let's stop and think about the problem we're trying to solve first. And with the current tool set, what is the most effective way to solve the problem?
That's
So
right.
instead of duplicating and automating, it is fundamentally rethinking. That requires so much brain power. It is exhausting. AI is so tiring to use right now because the migration can be really painful. So let's talk about understanding that pain, figuring out what is worth it. When you think about the migration to a real-time data infrastructure, uh, what's the right way to do it? Where does it fall down? How do people get from, "Here's my static dashboard," to dynamic data that's relevant today?
Yeah. Um, I think real-time data infrastructure as it stands today for most of the tech stacks that exist is very costly and extremely it's actually really time consuming to ensure that the data is not lost and it is much harder to query your data on top of live data than it is on static. And so a lot of the migrations aren't happening because companies are worried about that loss of fidelity. And so, it falls short. Eventually, the total cost of ownership becomes really, really high because you're trying to account for these things. And the ROI starts to like the math doesn't compute. Like you don't have a significant amount of ROI. And I think the right way to do it in the current moment is that you have to really think through where in your organization there will be incremental value. There's this concept of incrementality, which was drilled into us when we were at Meta, which is like, where is the incremental value to what I'm trying to change or what I'm trying to do? And if I really think AI is an interesting moment and I might be able to deploy it for improving certain processes within the company or improving how we do business or even improving our ability to make decisions, I have to think what are the pockets within my company where this will actually give me incremental value so that this ROI starts to compute, so that that pain of migration starts to become worthwhile because you can very quickly in your head do the math and say, yeah, like this migration might be difficult to imagine, the brain power that it takes for us to just sit down and map out that workflow, or figure out, which pockets within my company I can really benefit from having access to this live data, for example. And where the impact of live data is significantly higher than, I can probably live with data refreshes once a day or once a week, and it's not necessarily going to have a huge incremental impact on me running my business. I think that's where people fall short. They just don't do the homework enough, and they don't really pick the pockets or the areas where there will be that incremental value over time.
I'm glad that you talked about ROI when it comes to revamping your data stack, because I do think that the common answer is what we're doing is good enough. And well, live data will get me from my daily refreshed reports or my weekly refresh reports to my real time always on, but I'm not making decisions in real time. So where's the ROI, right? Other than real time data, that's a nice to have, but maybe not necessarily mandatory. There are other capabilities that come with a refreshed AI driven data tech stack. So talk to me a little bit about the live data capabilities and how are they driving higher customer engagement and conversions and things that actually drive real ROI?
Yeah. Look, there are certain functions that lend themselves and certain probably verticals that lend themselves to that more than others. From my experience with Incorta, this is where data is their oil, right? Like they have to live and breathe the data because every um, extra piece of information could have significant impact on their bottom line. So verticals like retail, supply chain, manufacturing, and finance. Some of our customers, you know, let's talk about in the food retail business. Um, just figuring out, one of our customers has, I don't know, 3,000 physical branches across the nation. And just figuring out what items are moving in their store at what times of day and being able to optimize for waste, like just that singular line item. And live data helps them optimize that waste because then they can push promotions to geosource people within the neighborhood and make sure that these items are actually consumed versus thrown away, and that it's almost like a revenue maximization. Even if they discount those items, it's better than completely not selling them and then having a significant amount of wastage. It also helps them move items from one branch to the other. If there's more demand in one branch versus another, almost in real time, it's like this branch is, there's more of item number one being consumed, and in this branch, the other, and then they can do swaps. It's a logistical nightmare to be able to do that without it being live.
Mhm.
So, and this customer isn't using us across the board for all of their data and all of their analytics across the company. They are using us in areas. They've done the homework. We've done the homework with them. Like we often go in, we have conversations, and then we advise. We're like, this is probably an area where you could benefit a significant amount from using your live data and running analytics or querying your data on top of it, and other areas perhaps not so much. So I think in verticals like retail, supply chain, manufacturing, we speak to companies that aren't that large, but every cent counts in hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of their revenue and their cost of manufacturing. And having real-time information about how some of this stuff is being used on their factory floors, again, across the nation, especially if they have like multiple branches, creates huge amounts of savings. So there are verticals that do lend themselves to that a little bit better than others. I just got a message from CVS yesterday. I was thinking about this on my way home. I got a message from CVS yesterday saying there's a surge in like flu in our neighborhood. Please come in and get your flu shot. That's an example of how, like, you know, if you're using live analytics on how many people are getting sick and coming in and buying flu stuff in your store, and you
Mhm.
can then use that to push people to come in and get their flu vaccine.
It's funny because when I get those notifications from CVS, I am assuming that that store is not performing well,
Yeah.
so they are purely just sending the message because sending a "you should get your flu vaccine" gets a certain number of people into the store, whether there is a rise in flu or not. I think it's a marketing ploy because when you go into that store, you come out with multivitamins, baby wipes,
That's
and some
right.
Cheetos, right? If the message was, "We've seen a 75% increase in the sale of Tamiflu this week. A flu epidemic in your zip code is coming. You should get vaccinated." I would probably respond a little bit differently than, "Hey, have you thought about your flu vaccine?" I was like, "Oh, this seems like
Correct.
better data." When you
Yeah.
were talking about the grocery store, it's funny because 'cause you're like, "All right, real-time data. Yeah, I want my data to be always updated. Sure, it's logical. I don't wanna pay for it. I don't wanna go through an entire infrastructure migration to get my reports an hour earlier." But you use the grocery store example of optimizing your throughput, right? Reducing your waste. You mentioned, finance, right? Optimal signals of when to buy or sell. I'm thinking of stock traders, right?
Yeah.
um, Manufacturing, or let's take retail, right? Customer experiences, improving what's actually available on your site based on your inventory in real time seems like something nobody likes the experience where they get an ad for a product.
Mhm.
They go to the website and the product isn't there. So
That's
there's
right.
multiple different examples of where live data really does have positive input, better margins, better customer experiences. Where doesn't it work? Where doesn't it matter? Where is the old what you were doing before fine? Are there industries where live data doesn't make a difference?
Um, it's a great question. I'm in the business of where it does, so it's hard for me to think of the negative
Well,
space. You know,
who
it's like
aren't
it's
who
like
aren't
that
you working with, right? I think that's a fair,
that is.
I obviously be transparent, but, you know,
Yeah.
sure, you work with all the grocery stores, great.
I think in every industry there's a pocket where live data does matter. When I first stepped into Incorta, I thought, oh, maybe one of the verticals is like education. Like, why would that matter? I couldn't conceive sitting at my desk of why would education, well, like, why would that be a sector that we would go after? And then to my surprise, I found that we actually have some really big university brand names as our customers. And as I dug into it, I was like, what's going on there? It's got to be the Office of Finance or something like that, right? Um, and then lately, we've had a surge in demand from the education sector as education is moving more towards ed tech, and being tech enabled in terms of how you're teaching and relaying content to your students. There is suddenly this surge in need in understanding student outcomes and student behavior in almost real time, and then adjusting instructions, curriculum, grading systems. Like it's hard for me to imagine a space. I think technology is just becoming so pervasive in so many different fields that I, sitting on the fence, would not have imagined. And I think this is the real unlock for me is what's really important about live data is it unlocks creativity. Like it truly unlocks human creativity, and their ability to understand the possibilities. Business users, I think, across all industries and all spaces need to have the ability to ask unlimited questions so that they can explore how they can improve their roles and jobs and do their work better. And so there are, I would say, instead of saying there are spaces where it doesn't lend itself, I would say there are low-hanging fruit and like it makes total sense and you can immediately map out the ROI in spaces like retail or supply chain or manufacturing or the Office of Finance. But there are other spaces where there isn't a direct ROI. It's almost like there's a correlation that work is improving in this space, but there isn't like I've saved X amount of money or I have improved my margins by X amount. And I think education was one of those examples that I was pleasantly surprised by that I would never have thought.
I wanna play devil's advocate a little bit, where, yeah, everybody should have access to this data so they can ask all of the questions that they want. And in theory, and you're probably right, but I think that there's an argument to be made that being able to ask more questions of your data isn't necessarily always a good thing because you can get analysis paralysis, right? If I have access to live data and I haven't taken the time to go through the exercise of what is my North Star? What are our KPIs? What are the metrics we are always going to look at? You can go down a rabbit hole and get lost in data. So, how do you balance this idea of real time insights without losing control over what really matters in your business?
I think that's why I was saying creativity, right? There's a difference between this is starting to feel a little like hot takes. I don't know if you've ever followed that social media account, but it's like your hot take is, asking more questions not good. My hot take is you should be able to ask away as many questions as you want. And here's the thing. Um, the creative process requires enough space for you to go into rabbit holes and noodle and get lost a little bit. And then aha moments really come from that. Um, and I think if you close that door and you become too rigid in like, I'm only measuring certain KPIs or I'm closing that door to curiosity. There are predefined things that matter to us, but then everything else, maybe, giving too much choice and too much room to rabbit hole into asking questions is going to create a paralysis. You might miss some really important bits of nugget. Like I can give you an example. When I first joined Meta 5, 6 years ago, um, I joined in a product called Commerce. Like at the time, the product org was Commerce and Payments, and we were in charge of launching like marketplace and shops and all the payments that happen across our apps. We had like 33 different payments use cases across our apps. Not all of them were consumer facing. But and we were trying to scale marketplace, which is a C2C, like you're selling, it's kind of like eBay. You're just selling
Mhm.
stuff to other people like you, predominantly use stuff from your home. And to scale it, it wasn't one of the largest services that were available on Facebook app at the time. This is fun little projects, as most things on Facebook, started. But it wasn't like what it is today, which is one of the largest drivers of daily active users on Facebook app. And to go from that to that, if we weren't open to asking questions and experimenting and having deep access to information and telemetrics and understanding how customer behavior is happening as they're using this product, we wouldn't have had an aha moment where it's like, "Oh, crap, COVID just hit." That completely kills the C2C model where I'm knocking on your door and I'm buying your old bike from you from your garage, and you're knocking on my door and you're buying my rollerblades or my surfboard or whatever. And
Mhm.
COVID hit and no one was allowed to meet anyone, right? So that was a real
Right.
problem. It's like our products growth just completely stalled.
Here in California, nobody was allowed to meet anyone, but
No, it's at
everywhere.
least, yeah, but, like, for a short period of time, the majority of the nation, even if they were allowed, they just didn't wanna do that. They didn't wanna go to your house and pick up your stuff. So, we saw usage tank just as the product was taking off. And if we didn't have the curiosity to dig into behaviors and start to see signals that people were trying to find alternate ways to exchange fraud, which meant that it was sticky enough and they still wanted to do this, but we're trying to we wouldn't have said, "Okay, like, let's provide C2C shipping. Like, let's actually pay for it, subsidize it, provide C2C shipping," which allowed this product to go from, good growth cycles into hockey stick growth. And that came from just us being able to constantly query and question how our consumers are behaving and using this app. So, very long-winded answer here is that I think there's room to say creativity is helpful. Sure, it can be a waste of time 80-90% of the time, but you can't design for the aha moments. You can't put rigid rails around the aha moments, and I think that's the missing piece, and that's what AI unlocks for a lot of people today. You can ideate on your own, or you can sit and ideate back and forth on ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you use Perplexity and say, "Hey, like, I wanna create a campaign, or I wanna write a story about XYZ," and then through a back and forth process, you're like, "Oh, I didn't think of that. Well, that is interesting," and then you rabbit hole in that, and then all of a sudden, you're all the better for it. Um, and I think that's what we're hoping enabling a business user to have unlimited ability to query their business information because they know best. Me in my role as the person that's in charge of POs for my company, I take care of like the PO, the purchase order process. I know a lot more about that process, and I know a lot more about the suppliers that I'm buying from than probably anybody else in this company. And you can't design that tops down. And the current way that data and dashboards and like analytics runs means you have to think of the questions first, design your entire pipeline to be able to answer those questions or have those KPIs ready. And then if you suddenly come up with a new question, to go back and redesign all of that is really, really hard and very, very expensive to do. So you end up getting stuck, not being able to ask new questions, not being able to dig in more, not being able to really utilize all the data that your business is generating to get creative and figure out what's a better way for me to run my
My
business.
hot my hot take was, is it actually better to be able to ask unlimited questions? What I actually believe is you need both. You need
Yeah,
to have a North Star metric, a goal, KPIs, an understanding of business performance.
for sure.
Then once you see the trend change in the business performance, you need to be able to dig into the data and understand why. And so, uh,
On that, I think I 100% agree. I'm going to use the hot takes language on that. I
great. All
100%
right.
agree.
All right. We're on the same page. And I think that, as we think about the migration, the idea of having live data and be able to ask questions of your data and get real-time feedback and not have to be beholden to the data structures of the past is an incredibly powerful tool. It does not remove the need for an understanding of your overall mission, objectives, and what goals are and metrics are most tightly tied to them. You still need your KPIs. The live data helps you understand why, and that's an incredibly powerful tool. All right, no, I want to move on to our lightning round, where I'm going to ask you a couple of Martech related questions related to live data, your experience, AI. So, are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
What was the most important learning about data that you gleaned from working at Meta?
In a nutshell, data helps you move faster. Bureaucratic processes that slow down a company typically start to come into shape because you're trying to mitigate bad decisions. And we obviously make decisions all the time, from how I sit up to what email I send to whom and where to deploy resources. And I think when I worked at Meta, in your onboarding, they say you move fast. It was always our mantra. And Meta really did care about moving fast. And in order to enable teams to do that, it had to remove the layers that are typically required to be in place for decisions to be made to mitigate that risk, which meant you were flattening decision making as much as humanly possible, that decisions are made as close to the work and the signal. And as a result, Meta was one of the most data-driven companies that I've probably ever worked for. And I think I just gave you an example of how we would unleash digging into data to just get creative ideation on how to improve the work, how to improve our products. And obviously, because Meta operates at scale, we're talking 3.5 billion consumers all over the world. Every tweak and fine tune that you do in the product impacts. It's kind of laughable. It's like, oh, we did this and it impacted 100 million people. And you're like, what? These numbers are staggering, right? And so um, the fidelity of the data and how fine tuned that data created huge impact for millions of people around the world.
Meta, notorious for move fast and break things. Maybe they've gone away from that moniker now.
Definitely.
One of the things that I've heard about the company is it's also very much driven by incrementality, and
Yes,
it's like, what's the micro uptick you can create in a product feature, because the base is so large that every little incremental change means a great amount of actual benefit.
correct. And very much driven by incrementality. Sometimes we would take decisions, and we know that it's going to move the needle, but is it really moving the needle, or in an incremental manner, or is the needle going to move anyway, even if we don't go down that route? And that was always a question that we would ask ourselves in product reviews. So, what I learned from Meta is data helps you move faster.
There it is. All right, moving on to the next question. What's the quickest way to improve analytics using live data?
It's a tough one. I would say question the why behind the data. So analytics, remember that ad for Pirelli, power is nothing without control. Analytics is nothing without insights. If you don't question why, you don't get the insights. And I think insights is where the value is. It's not necessarily in the data. Raw data in and of itself doesn't mean much. How you make connections between the data, I think inherent in that process, to constantly ask why. Like, why is the data telling me that things are behaving the way that they're behaving? What is the data trying to tell me? Why are my customers behaving this way? Why is my business behaving this way? And I think that's what's valuable.
It seems like live data allows us to act like children, where we
Mhm.
constantly sit there nagging at our parents. I remember when I was a child, I used to always, when I was whiny, would say,
Why?
because why? Because why? Because
Why?
why? "Ben, you can't have another cookie." "Because why?" We get to be our whiny children with our data and ask, "Because why?" And it allows us to get answered without our parents getting upset and saying, "No, you can't have any more cookies."
That's the hope. Yeah,
All
that's
right,
the hope.
moving on to our next question. What legacy marketing metric needs to die?
Oh my goodness. That is a hard one. I've struggled with that one. I know this is a lightning round, and here's another hot take, controversial. I think awareness. I think there's no inherent value in being known. I think in someone hearing of you or even recognizing your name, I think you need a stronger value signal. Do they understand you? Breakthrough is probably a more nuanced signal for awareness, message breakthrough, or Even better would be intent signals, right? But awareness in and of itself feels like a vanity metric to me that I know is important for top of the funnel, but I think the moment that like its only use is very much very early top of the funnel. I call it the zero space, but I feel like that dies as quickly as you measure it.
Yeah, I don't disagree that awareness can be, I don't know if it needs to go away or die, but awareness seems like it's that top of the funnel, vanity-ish metric. You need awareness before you can get to credibility, and you need credibility before you can get to consideration. It's funny, I was gonna say things like click-through rate. Right? The more that we are looking at AI and user experience changing, the less the click matters. The less you're gonna get people to your website to do the research on your own properties, the more they're gonna be researching you based on what can be gleaned from the entire world around your brand, and so I think click-through rate's a little, going away, but again, it kinda goes into the same thing where that direct traffic, right? People coming to your website to do your research, that seems to be going away, and honestly, you needed awareness to drive that.
Yeah, I considered click-through rate, but click-through rate is so broad. I think websites are dying. I think we know that to be true. You they might not fully die. You might still need to be able to go to the source of information and not rely fully on the summarized agentic or chatbot um, style research. And that's a whole conversation in and of itself. Um, but click through seems to be more of an intent based signal on some aspects of your funnel versus just awareness. Like, I'm not discounting that awareness is important and is the first step, but like I said, I feel like the moment you measure it, it's already dead. Like you do, its lifespan is so short.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
Its
fruit
usefulness, the lifespan of its usefulness is really short.
the fruit fly of metrics.
Yeah.
Alright, let's move on to our last question. What will the marketing analytics tech stack look like in 5 years?
I like this question. Remember the movie Minority Report?
I do.
Remember there was a scene where Tom Cruise is, like, walking and his eyes are
I
flashing and he
confuse
sees those.
Minority Report with Vanilla Sky very often.
Yeah, so there was this scene where, like, his eyes are flashing and he's seeing, like, these hyper personalized ads in holographic form, um, and I think a lot about that scene because I think AI will enable us to hyper personalize messaging and ads, perhaps in a way that we haven't been able to do before. So our analytics will become so laser, like you can really laser point your marketing
Mhm.
and across mediums. If I'm making like grand predictions of what, AI would enable marketing analytics to be like in 5 years, I think that would be it. It's like how might I analyze the right moment? Cuz we often in marketing contend with, okay, I might have the right message for my ICP, but I'm hitting them in the wrong moments, in the wrong, like they're seeing the message in the morning when they should be seeing it in the evening, or they're seeing it on LinkedIn when they should be seeing it on, I don't know, TikTok, right? And I think what AI analytics, marketing analytics is going to be enabled to do with AI in the next 5 years is just get really, really good at hitting the right message to the right person at the right time and hyper target.
I've been married for 11 years. We dated for 5 years before that, so I haven't really thought about this in a good 16 years, but my dating strategy was always right person, right place, right time. And I think that when it comes to marketing, we're getting more towards being able to understand what that is with our advertising campaigns because of AI. We're seeing the wave of personalization come, and then the next flavor of this is going to be, yeah, but when are they going to be receptive to the message as well? So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, all right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you for going through the lightning rounds. Congratulations, you survived the gauntlet. And that wraps up this episode of the MarTech Podcast. A huge thanks to Noha Rizk, the CMO of Incorta, for joining us. If you'd like to contact Noha, you can find a link to her LinkedIn profile in our show notes or visit martechpod.com. If you'd like to learn more about Incorta, you can visit their website, which is incorta.com, incorta.com. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app, or of course, visit us on YouTube, where we'll be back in your feed every week. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.